Test, test, test. Can you guys hear me? Test.
Okey, dah dengar, Doktor.
Okay. Give me a second, yeah. Give me a second. I have to reply the treasury for a bit. Okay, sorry ya. Assalamualaikum and good evening. I'll repeat what I said because most of you most probably didn't hear me just now. So for your test one, I've already completed marking and everything, but I want to wait until Wednesday so that I could also address the other class lah. And any kind of question, any kind of remark, I think it's much more efficient if we have the session while also include the other class. And so for today is going to be continuation of our lecture subject, which is on chapter 3, methodology for preparation of energy management system. Okay, so for today's topic, it's going to be very short. Hopefully, if we start early, we'll be able to finish up early. Okay, so that's it. Please make sure to turn on your camera to make sure. I just want to make sure that the recording shows that the class is participating and not just me mumbling by myself. Okay, some of you have already turned on your camera. Please turn on your camera so that we can start. The faster we start our class, the faster we're going to end the session today. And it's going to be a very theoretical topics. There's not so much calculation, nothing to share much on the practical side of it, but basically it's theoretical lectures. Yes, I guess most of you okay lah, have turned on the camera, so we'll continue with our lecture. So for today, it's on methodology for energy management system. Basically, what you're going to use to physically do the energy management in your organization. And in order for you to do that, you have to have the necessary tools. And when I'm saying tools, it's not hammer, screwdriver, or what do you call that? All the hardware equipment that you might want. It's more on the side of documentations, forms, and organizational architecture or organizational aspect, not so much on the tool itself. So don't be confused. When we are talking about working manual and tools, it's basically how the forms, the organization, and the the what do you call it? The all the necessary documentation for you to be able to distribute the information and then make sure that everyone follows the necessary steps to obtain the to implement the energy management system in the organization. Okay, so before you have any kind of manual or tools to implement EM, first thing first, you need to have EEI, which is the Energy Efficiency Index. Remember, if you recall chapter 2, I think, where you record each month punya energy consumption. Okay. So record every month energy of consumption, or maybe a certain period energy consumption, so that the baseline the baseline energy consumption, electrical energy consumption, I'm not talking specifically on electrical energy, for that period of time, typically 1 year, has been established. So that, of course, if you want to show improvement, you have to indicate to your bosses or maybe Suruhanjaya Tenaga as the auditor, to show that to them you have improved. And in order for you to do that, you have to have some basics comparison sebelum dan selepas. Kan? Macam makeup juga. Sebelum macam ni, selepas macam ni. So the same thing goes here. You have to have a baseline EEI first. You have to set it up first. That means you have already had the monitoring, the data logging and whatever not required. You have to set it up first before you're able to come up with a working manual, the manual, and any kind of tools that you want to use for energy management system. And therefore, it is important for you to, before you start any kind of energy management program, to have this set up first, which is the baseline EEI. If you recall chapter 2, the one that we have the just revisit my lecture video, the one that we show you the what do you call that? Not the metrics, the EI. So you'll have some sort of like a graph. So that's the EI of electrical energy consumption, and has been set and has a common agreement among the executive and the EM committee. Basically, what it says here is that you can only start your work on energy management program once you have EEI set up, and also all the proposed work to be done has been agreed upon between the owner of the company or the board of directors, the executive, as well as the committee of energy management program. Okay, so once you've got that first thing first, the second thing that you need to prepare to make sure to have at the back of your mind before you, in order for you to continue with your energy management program, is that each EAC, if you recall previously when I mentioned, each section of working area might have their own energy consumption for that specific catered for them. That means you can't lump sum production site together with the HR office. It will be an imbalance. That means your production site might consume too much of electrical energy, whereby your HR office maybe just one third or even lesser than one third energy consumption in overall energy consumption for the organization. So each site that may consume certain level of energy consumption, you might want to dedicate that site as one its specific EAC, and the other one as its own specific EAC. This is just a recall what is EAC is. So each EAC, that's it, each EAC that has their own energy consumption profile, you might want to use their own working manual and their own documentation and their own tools for them to realize the energy management program. For example, like I said, production, in order for you to come up with a working manual, when we are talking about working manual, is actually just a manual how to operate the machine. So imagine a manual that instruct a user on how to when to turn on the machine, when to turn off, when to make sure that now only 3 parameters to be used, not the full parameter. For example, you can't exactly use the same manual to the HR office, right? So each EA, what it meant by that sentence there is that each EAC has their own working manual catered specifically for them. So for production, working manual for the machine. For HR office, working manual to when to turn on, when to turn off the air conditioner and whatnot. Maybe the warehouse, a different set of manual, which is when to turn on the aircon or when not to turn on the aircon, when to turn on the chiller, when or not to turn on the chiller, for example. So each EAC has their own manual specifically catered for them. So as energy committee or energy manager, you have to be mindful that each AAC might have specific requirement uh, that is suited for specifically for them. And when you're talking about working manual and tools that you need to conduct energy management, basically they consist of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I thought there's another one more, but there should be at least these 5 items where process mapping, where the items that falls under working manual tools. Sorry, saya English saya dah lama tak cakap. Seminggu cuti saya pun ni balik mumbling balik. It's okay. So you need to have process mapping, you need to have work instruction, you need to have log sheet, you need to have calculation sheet, and you need to have operational guideline. So what is this? We'll explore in the next slide. So process mapping, the first one, PM, is basically for you to understand how the process flows. So that means maybe the production of a cake, for example. One end you put in raw material, all the dough, all the flour and whatnot. At the other end, mixing of maybe the sugar mixing and chocolate mixing, whatever not. And then when it comes to the machine, which part goes first? Maybe the what do you call that? The flour first, and then you melt the chocolate, put it on the flour so that it becomes thick or whatnot. I don't know how to make a cake, and then comes the sugar as a fondue and whatnot, and then becomes the cake. So which goes first? Sorry. So that is how the process mapping helps you. So you need to have that process mapping in order as a tools to analyze the characteristic of energy consumption. So for example, in the cake, typically the energy consumption will be much higher when you're trying to melt the chocolate instead of the flour, right? Because melting a chocolate, you might want to have heat energy quite significant continuously, running maybe 5 or 10 hours continuously, so that the chocolate will be melt continuously. So, and therefore, having a process map will enable you to understand which area to cater to help you with energy management, which is, for me, if it's cake, the chocolate melting, because you need to use heat if you're using electrical stove and whatnot. So basically, process mapping helps you to analyze the characteristic of energy consumption in each EAC, not only the each EAC, but also the equipment itself. So having a process mapping helps you with that, and also indicate the details of all sub-processes in EAC. Macam tadi lah, ada dah mention. Let's say, for example, your EAC is the kitchen. Your another EAC 1 is the kitchen, EAC 2 is the living room, EAC 3 is all the bedroom and whatnot. So EAC1 that you're trying, because EAC1 is going to be the most highest energy consumption in the whole house. So because there's a lot of heating element, cooling element, and I mean nak masak kan, biasalah, bakery for example. So EAC1 is the whole EAC, but uh, cooking a cake, the chocolate, the flour, and the sugar is one sub process, and then maybe creating the I'm not very fluent with bakery, but I would assume once you open a bakery store, chances are you'll also be mixing dough to buat roti, all the Danish bread and whatnot too. So I would assume you have another process to mix the dough to come up with a certain types of Danish, and then another certain type of dough for donuts, or for example like that. So cake is one sub process, donut is one sub process in the same EAC1, the kitchen. So donut is one sub process, cake is one sub process, and then the Danish cookies and whatnot is another sub process. So that it helps you to see which sub process that could be more influential in realizing your energy management program by having that process mapping. So it helps you So that's why it's called also as the tools for energy management. So process mapping is the first one. So the objective here is to identify which sub-process does which. So for cake, maybe this sub-process. For donut, this sub-process. So you can clearly see how and where the sub-process the products come from lah. And then identify each types of source of energy, material input and production output of each sub-process. Macam tadi, donut, most probably flour, sugar, and then I think electrical mixer lah kot. And then the oven, whereby cake maybe the chocolate heater apa semua tu, and then fondue machine ke apa. Sorry, saya if I'm wrong, I know I'm wrong, maybe because I haven't had any chance of or I have any interest in making bakery. So if I'm wrong, just take it for the face value lah. Don't go into detail into that. But maybe like for example, for cake, you need to have heating element to melt down the chocolate. And for donut, maybe similar to the Danish side of things, but maybe after they've cooled, after they have cooled down, the sub process will be slightly diverged. So may require a certain types of energy sources. So that's helps you process mapping will helps you identify these so your process mapping basically the objective that you need to come up with is to identify which sub process belongs to which, what types of energy source, material input and production output for each sub processes, understand how and what type of energy is being used. Maybe for example for cooking melting the chocolate, just a simple kitchen gas, whereby for Danish maybe chiller for example, I don't know. And then identify what are the control parameters. So in this case the conventional gas is the gas minyak masak tu lah, the gas masak tu lah. And then chiller is the chiller punya ni, saya sendiri tak pernah, I haven't had a chance to install or what you call it, operate a chiller. So I would assume take this at my knowledgeable face value, operate macam fridge lah. So most probably you'll need electrical socket which consume electrical energy lah. And then identify how related data has been collected. So this is also important because if you don't know how the data is being collected, chances are you are subjected, you open yourself to a lot of variables. That means betul ke data ni collect reliable, which means does it truly reflect the process is being done? So example is there's sudden overshoot in the data. What does it mean? Of course, you have to know how the data is being collected, what does the data means, and then again, moving forward, even you as a business person later on, chances are you in IR 4.0, chances are you'll be playing around a lot in data processing. Even when I joined the Facebook punya group for entrepreneurs, they talk a lot about data, even though they are not science background, even though they are not engineering background or what you call that, CS, computer science punya background, they do talk a lot because they need to identify their potential client, their market segment, their, I don't know, business punya talks, but the data moving forward for you guys, your challenges is not so much on dapat kerja, dapat duit. No, I think your challenges is in order for you to become prosperous is understanding data. So that's it. Merepek. Once you got the data, you need to understand. Jangan ambil data. Okay, ni data saya, tak boleh. No, you have to understand how the data operate. What does the data is trying to tell you? So if there's sudden spike, if there's sudden loss of data, you know, maybe this data isn't correct. You need to get another set of data, not this data. So nobody can tipu lah. And then of course, you yourself to understand the process, you need to understand the data. Okay, so how do you develop the process mapping? So first, you need to draw the flow diagram. Cake, nak dapatkan for you to get a cake, you have to I think start with the flour, water, egg yolk. I'm not sure, maybe, and then mix it up. So you make sure it flows from flour to apa tadi? Uh, Water, egg yolk, not egg yolk, flour, water. So that's what is it's meant by process flow, step by step, so that you know how does the energy is being used as the step progresses in order for you to produce a cake. So define type and amount of energy input. Once you have that flow diagram, you have to figure out which energy is being used at which stage, the product output at the end of it, the control parameters. That means how much, how long do you need to stir the base, the flour, in order for it to become a cake, or for example, I don't know. And then specify any kind of standard or reference value for each control parameter. I think this is more like a secret punya, let's say for example KFC secret recipe. Certain amount of sugar, certain amount of flour, certain amount of what type of flour, certain amount of spices and herbs. So you have to identify standard and reference for each parameter as the process move forward at each stages. And then once you have uh, plot down from start to end, then you collect each the energy consumption for that process, cake tu saja, and then donut pula, and then Danish pula, for example. So each EEI tu, of course, you have to have the whole at the start of the energy management program, you have the whole organization punya EEI. Then you go down specifically to the EAC one kitchen punya EEI, and then as you get deeper, you get the EI for the sub process. I mean, of course, it's quite a hassle. You have to have a lot of what you call that meter and data logger and whatnot, and it will be costly. But this is actually how you're able to define the the what you call that energy management program successfully. So if you can't, maybe certain limitation, physical limitation or whatnot, then some sort of experience, rough numbers could also be applied. So it doesn't have to be data logger specific. You have to get to that speed. No, it doesn't have to be like that. It can also come out with a, so that you can overall see overall which sub process can be optimized, which can be just leave it as it is. Chances are, because there's not much energy is being used there. And also, once you have defined the sub EI, basically this will then is either from data that you got from data logger, or approximation of experience, years of experience, which is the person who operate. Then you can start record existing energy consumption and any kind of control parameters that you have adjusted, so that at the end of it, you realize, okay, these control parameters, maybe before this, you set 100 degrees Celsius to roast the chicken, for example. Now, you just turn it off slightly to 90 degrees Celsius. It's going to take longer, yeah, but the, not say longer lah, but the end process, meaning the chicken meat, will still be cooked. Maybe not to the extent of the one that you have already. I mean, the normal way that you have done, but now the chicken taste will not be different. It will be not that cooked compared to the one that you normally do, but still the taste is there. The quality is still there. So that will be a good energy consumption, energy efficiency, energy management program lah being done. Using slightly less input, you still get the same output, more or less. So that's why you need to record any kind of changes that you've done to the control parameters, and any kind of energy consumption data that you cut as a result of the control parameter that you've done. Okay, so Continuing from that, you analyze. Of course, once you have all the data, you need to analyze to compare the actual EEI for the EAC, for the sub EEI, for each of the process, cake, donut, and whatnot too. And then compare it with the control parameters in previous step 3 and 4, and then review and finalize any kind of control parameter that actually suited or is best that best improve the whole process and the sub EEI. Okay, I'm talking about kitchen. Typically, when you're talking about kitchen, you don't need to have multimeter, data logger installed at the kitchen itself. Imagine this as in a big company lah, in a factory where the energy I mean, typically, when your bosses want you to do energy efficiency program, typically your company will be big because you consume tons of energy, and then Suruhanjaya Tenaga issue you a warrant to come up with the, remember, regulation 16. Once you consume more than 30 megawatt per 6 month consecutive, then you'll be served with Suruhanjaya Tenaga, and that means your company is big lah, consuming 30 megawatt per 6 month continuous, right? So it's justified lah if you have sub-process tu pun ada dia punya own data logger, not the whole TMD meter dia. Okay. Okay, next we look into the second one, which is the work instruction. Remember, we have 5 PM work instruction, log sheet, calculation sheet, and operational guideline. So we'll look into work instruction. Basically, work instruction is how the worker, typically when you're collecting data, it won't be the energy manager themselves who collect the data, because energy manager only knows how to navigate energy management program. But to operate the machine, chances are it will be either the engineer or the technician. So typically they are the one who will be collecting data for you. And that's it. They will receive their, sorry, they will receive their instruction from their boss. And that is why energy committee should include their boss in the committee. And the work instruction typically will be advised by the boss of that EAC, because they know their equipment best lah, or when to turn on, which switch to turn on before you turn on all the switch, for example. So work instruction comes from them to advise the staff to collect which, I mean, a typical machine will have tons of data, but which data that actually you want to use for energy management program. So this is where work instruction comes in, where it indicates to the staff, you need to only collect maybe certain types of data and how it should be collected so that the data stays valid. You don't want to spend one whole month collecting data and find out in your computer later on when you want to analyze, everything shows NA, 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 not available, not available. You don't want that. So that is why not only knowing what data is to collect is needed, you also need to know how to collect the data so that the data value is good lah, for you to use for your analyze stage. So this also include troubleshooting, just in case maybe the sensor you found out that needs some calibration, or maybe there's dust in the camera, resulting in your data showing no image. Again, there's also the data, so it's just simple rub the front of the camera, the screen, and then you should be good to go. So collecting data, knowing how to get the correct data is important, is also called as troubleshooting. So this is where work instruction comes in to help the staff that collects the data themselves to operate efficiently. And then the third one, which is the log sheet, is form for the operator to fill in if any changes or the certain kind of operation parameters is being implemented. For example, the cake, maybe this time around you use 6 bar of chocolate, dark chocolate, and the temperature you only use instead of typically 110, now you use 100 degrees Celsius. So that parameters should be included in the log sheet in order for you to give a value or face, a face to the data that you have collected. Apa? I hope my explanation is good. Um, but never mind. If I elaborate more on that, it's more towards data science, so never mind. But basically, you need to have a log sheet to elucidate the data to the reader, you, later on when you want to analyze the data. What does this data, how come this data is being displayed like this? The asal usul dia lah, mak bapak data tu. So that means if you change 110, this is the duration of the chocolate to melt compared to previously you use 120 degrees Celsius. It took maybe 1 hour, and you change it to 100 degrees Celsius. Now it took 3 hours. So why the 3 hours? Because you use 100. So you have the label lah for the data. So that's what the log sheet does. And then calculation sheet, this is more on the analyze stage later on, but it can also be during data sampling or data calculation. Data collecting. For you to have a simple version of calculation, then you can use calculation sheet directly during data collection. But basically, calculation sheet is to analyze what is the data trying to tell you. Turning on 100 degrees Celsius resulted in extended duration of the chocolate to melt. Compared to previously, you use 150, it can melt in around 1 or 2 hours. Now it's 3 hours. So why? You know, because you turn it off 10 degrees Celsius compared to previously. So for a simple calculation like macam tadi saya cerita, instead of 115 or 110, you can tolak dah direct. You basically you tell the story of by reducing minus 40, I'm able to get this certain amount of chocolate melt duration, for example. So that's calculation sheet. Any kind of mathematics, any kind of algorithms, or any kind of what do you call that, graph pertaining the process should be included in the calculation sheet. And then operational guideline, basically to indicate the energy management procedures for each EAC should be prepared by head of EAC. So basically operational guideline ni after you have established all the previous steps lah, the previous manuals and whatnot. So this will help you to make sure if there's any kind of personnel staff changes, or maybe certain uh, staff resign ke apa ke. So operational guideline could help you to elucidate to the next person who's going to operate the machine on how to operate it optimally in order to realize energy efficient usage. So operational guidelines should cover at the minimal objective. What is the guideline is trying to help you typically to operate a machine? Scope of the guideline, only operate on this machine, not other machine that has different models. Normal working procedures, when it is advisable for you to operate the machine, maybe chiller better operate during tengah hari, malam off lah, buat apa ni sebab malam sejuk. Maybe operate at only half, what you call that, half efficiency instead of full efficiency during afternoon. Checking procedures, if there's maintenance, if there's any leakage, if there's any issue troubleshooting, that is the checking procedures could help you with that. And then standard form or related document, maybe the spec sheet, maybe the energy consumption sheet, whatever information regarding that machine should also be included in the operational guideline. So this is the bare minimum. It can also be extended forms of it, but at the very least, these are the things that you need to observe when you come up with an operational guideline for the machine. So this is the recommended procedures. What does it mean is that during, before and after. So before, basically you have to have a operational guideline and working instruction, and then once you implement that, record any kind of changes or control parameters that you have changed, in the log sheet, and then use the log sheet to come up with a calculation sheet. If it's a simple plus or minus, you can just put it into the log sheet. But if it's a very thorough punya analyze, you need to put it differently, which is under the calculation sheet. Basically, this is where you analyze your data, and then you report the analysis to the either head of EAC or the Energy Management Committee, and then revise according to the consensus or maybe agreement by the top management if it's required to realize the energy management, or maybe continuously, maybe the company is trying to continuously improve, so you have to revise lah any kind of pertaining document, OG ke, PM ke, WI ke, so LS ke. So if the objective of energy management program has changed over a period of years, so this is where revision is being done after analysis. Okay, once you have done that, okay, so this is the first stage. And once you have established the first year, maybe this area, then now this is normal working procedures, which is being done every year. But this one is if there is any revision needed. Like say for example, the second year, third year, fourth year, mula-mula maybe first year tu, your boss want you to save maybe only 10%. Second year, your boss wants to reduce, okay, dia tengok 10% achievable. Now he wants more, biasalah boss. Now he wants more, 20% pula. Next year, 30% pula. Fifth year, maybe 100% pula. Dia nak pakai solar pula, panel pula, for example. So this is where the revision works being done lah. Once you got the data, maybe this is at the third year. So you got the third year data, you analyze the third year punya data as a with the head of EAC. So maybe this time around, okay, dah boleh save instead of pakai gas minyak masak biasa, gas masak biasa, now pakai gas asli pula. Maybe gas asli murah, I'm not sure. So dia kata okay, boleh pakai itu, tukar. So ECM identify and implement. Now they try to compare. So this is where the revision is being done. So basically for me, this is the first year. This is second year onwards, where revision is being done if there is any changes in the objective target that you're trying to achieve. Okay. So this also includes the checking procedures lah, of course, because once you have changed the objective, you have changed the saving energy parameters, then that means you have to double check lah whether that revision does reflects the work being done. Okay, so this one will bypass. Okay, we continue this. I think we have just another few slides more. We finish it up terus. Okay, then we look into operational guideline. This one, this one, I think this is under the training program for AMAS Energy Manager program. So we don't have this in the workbook. But I think because this slide is actually from Shah Alam, Dr. Nabil is the one who conduct all the training and whatnot. So I think this is part of his training program. So you can bypass that. Okay, so we look into energy management working procedures, WP. And basically, the organization has to formulate working procedures for their staff to do their daily operational work. So there are two levels of working procedures, the organization level and then the EAC level. So organization level typically will be instructed by the Energy Management Committee, whereby EAC level by the head of the specific EAC that you have assigned for that EAC. Because each of the head typically would know, supposedly, each EAC supposedly have to know the exact working condition or safe working operation parameters for a certain type of machine. So each level, therefore, should come up with their own EAC working procedures that is being set up by head of EAC instead of the Energy Management Committee. So there are two levels there. For organization level, yes, Energy Management Committee will set it up, but for EAC level, will be constructed by head of EAC for that particular EAC. Okay, so this is the procedures for you to start your steps after you have all for the working procedure and the tools and whatnot. So first, you need once you have been served with Regulation 16 notice, you have to assign energy manager. So this can be anybody from the executive level. You can also set up. Then once you have assigned the energy manager would then, as advised by the energy manager, sorry, the executive board, as advised by the energy manager, will appoint who will be part of the energy management committee. And then once the energy management committee has been set up, then you start the work of the energy management status for that particular year when you're trying to start where you are right now in terms of energy consumption. So basically, this involves energy management metrics and also your EEI baseline. Typically, energy management metrics will be simpler, so you can immediately come up with it. Whereby EEI, you need to install all the data logger, all the meter and whatnot, so you'll be able to get the whole year punya energy consumption, the exact figure. So that's why EEI is going to be a little bit later, but energy management metrics can be almost immediately. Okay, once you have set up once you have evaluated the current energy management status, then you set up or review the energy management component for to come up with the action plan lah. Sorry, to bring the EM component to the level that you want. And then if there's supposedly you're able to find out, okay, these steps can be taken almost immediately, which is to turn off switch after everyone's go back to their home. So then if you enable, because that's almost free, it's just instructing the last person in the room to turn off the aircon and the lighting. So it's almost free. So then you can start to target or revise the energy target and plan for the year. I think typically if you haven't had any energy management program, if you just turn off switch once you go home, you will see significant reduction in electrical energy consumption by almost half. Because you remember, you supposedly start work by 8, so that means all the air condition needs to be start up by 6 or 7 a.m. And then you got home at 6 p.m. So if you turn off the switch by 6 p.m., so 12 hours of energy, which is from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. dah cut half lah. Before this turn on je. So if you just turn off the switch pun dah 50% energy consumption sepatutnya lah being reduced. So you can start to revise the energy target and plan for 1 or 3 years accordingly to your energy action plan that you want to implement. And then assign saving targets to each EAC. So you have to be you have to be realistic here lah. You can't say to HR department to save the overall energy consumption to 80%. HR department ada lampu ni, kipas ni, aircon je. So energy consumption typically wouldn't be that huge compared to warehouse. Maybe warehouse if there is a chiller, the production area. So you have to be realistic lah on that. So in assigning the target specific for each EACs, the EM committee has to allocate the responsibility to each EAC according to their territories, and then the target allocation and of each EAC that consumes large amount of energy will get bigger allocation than the other. So the same thing what I've mentioned earlier lah. Production side, typically you have to tell them you need to at least cut half. Of course, typically they won't lah because tengok demand lah kan. Every month suddenly this month the sales spikes. Nak tak nak kena produce lah banyak. So try to, as best as you could, to tell them that they need to uh, maybe try to save around 20%, whereby for HR office and others too, accordingly lah to their energy consumption contribution to the overall energy consumption of the organization. Okay. So once you've assigned the saving targets for each AACs, now you have to identify what measures can be done to help them to realize the energy target saving plan. So therefore, each AAC themselves have to identify which area that they could save, and then formulate the EACWP with all the tools OG, PM, WI, LS, and CS ni tadi which is operational guide, process management process PM tadi. Ni process mapping, work instruction, log sheet, and calculation sheet. Sorry saya semalam drive. Penat. Okay, so where are we? On daily basis. So this one need to be worked on. If there is a revision ke apa ke, you need to work on this almost daily. Because EACWP, which is this one, working procedures, will help you to identify energy saving measures or energy ESM or control energy consumption, so that you will be able to realize your energy target plan. And then once you have done all these, all the things that being done here, again, you need to present first before implement. Any kind of, ingat this is not your company, unless of course this is your company. Itulah cerita lah. Tapi typically if you're the energy manager, typically you'll be appointed by your boss. Boss tak nak buat kerja. Typically buat apa dia? Upah orang kan, gaji orang kalau dia yang buat kerja. So typically, this will not be a company. So any kind of instruction, any kind of action plan that you want to perform in that company, you need to get their approval lah. And also, once they approve, that gives you a valid reason to ask them for the budget. This is the most important part. There's no benefit of you come up with a bombastic kind of plan and there's no budget for it. Then typically it will not be realized. Okay. So that's almost the last, but not the very least of the steps, which is the measures and to present the measures and the budget to get the approval. Sorry, not the last. This is the last one, which is continuous improvement. Sorry. Kan ada lagi last, ada J. Of course, once you have got the budget, once you get the approval, you need to implement. Implement all the measures that you have planned, and then make sure to monitor and assess whether the action plan that you have proposed actually do impact the overall energy consumption. So for implement the improvement measures, you have to set up the SIT team to implement, of course, because each EAC you can't typically ask the cleaner to operate this machine to come up with a better operation lah kan. Mesti you have to have specific person to operate the machine that is able to deliver the target energy plan. So that is why you have to set up SIT for that specific EAC. And that has typically the team sponsor, which is the energy manager punya committee lah. And then team leader, the head of EAC, for example, and then the technician or the operator or whoever that touches the machine physically. And then if the measurement improvement of measures has been implemented, the SIT team can be disbanded. Not to say disbanded once and then tak payah buat lagi dah. No, next year set up lagi if there is another set of parameter that you want to change. Okay, and then monitor and assess the results to make sure that all the parameters being proposed does take effect and everyone knows, and therefore if it works, you can then present it to your bosses to show that the works has been done. And then there are two level of monitoring and assessment: organizational level, which is done at least once a year, to make sure that their EMWP, the EEI has reflect the energy consumption. That means whatever EAC told you, they have done this, done this, sepatutnya reflect dekat the organization punya EEI lah as a whole. If not, then typically ni benda biasa lah ni. In industry orang tipu-tipu apa semua ni sebab nak lari buat kerja kan. So itu benda biasa lah tu. So it's more on fact checking lah. And then EAC level need to be done once a month or every 3 months at the very least, to make sure that the performance of improvement measures and daily practice is adhered. Now, this one is conducted internally, where organization level can include outside punya ni lah, outside punya service provider. So these are the tables that helps you to see when, who, and what types of tools can be used to realize each level. So assign energy manager, executive board lah, or the owner are the one who can appoint, or the person that is being appointed. Sorry. And then set up EM committee, depends on the energy management and energy manager and also the executive board. Sorry, tadi tu executive board appoint. Sorry. And then evaluate EM status. Both basically the executive level lah ni. A to D, all of it falls under executive level punya jurisdiction. And the tools that they can use is the energy management metrics to come up with the status, and also energy efficiency index. If you don't have the data logger, then chances are you'll need to wait for a year lah until you be able to come up with the EEI. But if you do already have it, then you can come up with it almost immediately. And then once you got that, set up, review EM components. This is falls under Energy Management Committee up until level E, which is set or revise the ETNP. And then, but assigning is also Energy Management Committee, but actually doing the work falls under the EAC themselves. And approval for any kind of budget requirement, measures, presentation, and whatnot falls under Energy Management Committee and Energy Accounting Centers. So the tool that you can use for the EACs to identify the measures is the one that we've discussed previously, which is OG, PMWI, LS, and CS. So that is all for today. Saya tahu it's very dry, it's very boring, but this question, I believe, has been asked quite extensively in chapter 2. So don't take these things simply, because methodology is the one that is the detail of EPO626. So you need to know and to understand what are the tools that you need in order for you to realize energy management program in any organization. Okay, so far, do you guys have any questions? Everything's clear, I hope. No questions? Okay, if there are none, again, if you have any question, can reach to me. I'll try my best to help you with the subject matter. But if not, then we'll end our session today with Tasbih Kifarah and Surah Al-Asr.